Earth should be understood as a historical or as a geohistorical adventure, a term I will propose so as to absorb what it means to live at the epoch of the Anthropocene. The venerable word human means etymologically from the soil and shares the same root with humus, the soil. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you will return. If we are not able to disengage theology from an epistemology that has ruined the distinction between nature and creation, it's in vain that the psalmist has sung, "You send forth your spirit, and you renew the face of the earth." It took a long time for anthropologists to realize that nature was far from a universal category. If nature is not universal, climate might be a new way to understand anthropology. Climatologists offer a unique occasion to explore this post-epistemological version of a trade. By highlighting this community equipped with instruments, working with models, exchanging emails, going to conferences, standardizing dataset, applying for money, organizing consensus meetings, publishing policy summaries, they believe that this humble and material activity should be taken as proof that climate science is not a really good science. An epistemological version of scientific discipline is offered when the results of science are divorced from its production, so much so that any allusion to its human-made basis is taken as a debunking of its objectivity. How come there is no legitimate way to accept the humble conception of scientific truth? Remember that if it's understandable that scientists want to do away with spirit, souls, divinity, and other forces, this is not because they have managed to substitute for them a purely material word. It's because those agencies answer to other gods. One size fits all, and yet rational discourse is not to treat everything in the same dispassionate tone, but to learn how to detect the different tones adjusted to the different situation so as to be able to sing all of them in the right tune. That's my definition of rationality. The blue planet suddenly stands out as what is made of a long concatenation of historical, local, hazardous, specific, and contingent events, as if it were the temporary outcome of a geohistory, as attached to specific places and dates, as the biblical narrative. That is exactly what was not to be taken into account when considered simply as a falling body among other falling bodies. To be able to read cosmic events out of minuscule disruption in the orderly layers of life was something common to the emerging science of geohistory, as well as to the deciphering of incarnation and its complex web of textual emendation. Not only should the Earth be the center of our exclusive attention, but we should also feel responsible for what happens. No escape twice. Climate is the historical result of reciprocal, mutually interfering connection among all growing creatures. If we now live in an oxygen-dominated atmosphere, it's not because it's a preordained feedback loop. It's because organisms that have turned this deadly poison into a formidable accelerator of their metabolism have spread. Oxygen is not there simply as part of the environment, but as the extended and unintended consequence of an event continued to this day by the proliferation of organisms. In the same way, it's only since the invention of photosynthesis that the sun has been brought to bear on the development of life. Both are consequences of historical events that will last no longer than the creatures sustaining them. Nitrogen is not where it's supposed to be, in the sea, where it would have increased the salinity so much that no organism could have kept their cell walls protected against the poison of salt. Then take water. It should have escaped long ago, so as it did on Venus or Mars. How come it's still there? Try to explain this situation through the normal laws of chemistry, you, the proponents of the balance of nature. The Earth has abandoned ocean because it has evolved not by geophysics, but as a system in which the organisms play an integral part. The divide between the natural and the social sciences has become moot. Neither nature nor society can enter the Anthropocene intact. The Anthropocene brings the human back on stage and dissolves forever the idea that it is a unified agent of history. It makes no sense to talk about the anthropic origin of global climate warming if by anthropic you mean something like the human race. Hundreds of different people will at once raise their voice and say that they feel no responsibility whatsoever for those deeds at a geological scale. And they will be right. Indian nation in the middle of the Amazonian forest have nothing to do with the anthropic origin of climate change, nor do the poor blokes in the slums of Mumbai who can only dream of having a bigger carbon footprint. This is why the Anthropocene, in spite of its name, is not a fantastic extension of anthropomorphism. Rather, it's the human as a unified agency, as a universal concept that has to be broken down into many different people with contradictory interests. We have permanently entered a post-natural epoch. Ecological questions are not there to assemble stakeholders peacefully. They divide more surely than any issue of the past. The complete oddity of Western philosophy, science, is to have invested all its virtue into the figure of a globe. The notion of a globe and any global thinking entail the immense danger of unifying too fast what should be composed instead. Since in order to design a circle, you need to come back to your departure point by following some sort of a loop. It's the only way to become secular in science as well as in theology. It's only because Magellan's ship returned that his contemporaries could engrave deeper in their mind the image of a spherical Earth. But it's also more. It's only when you feel that your action is coming back to you that you sense that you are made responsible for it. It's only once humans see pollution coming back at them that they begin to really feel that the Earth is indeed round. Orbis terrarum sive sphera, sive Deus, sive natura. Here's actually the source of a fascination that the image of a sphere has exerted from Plato to NATO. The spherical shape smoothed down knowledge into one continuous, complete, transparent, ubiquitous volume that hides the extraordinarily difficult task of assembling controversial data points coming from many different instruments. A sphere has no history, no beginning, no end, no whole, no discontinuity of any sort. It's not only an idea, it's the very ideal of ideas. It's what you wish to passively contemplate when you are tired of history. The notion of homeostasis and climate control take on an even more metaphysical dimension. Any thought, any concept, any project that ends up ignoring the necessity of a fragile envelope that makes existence possible, a contradiction in terminis. I am convinced that at the root of climate skepticism, there is this amazing reversal in the direction of progress. At the epoch of the Anthropocene, the great narrative of emancipation has made us totally helpless at finding our way to where we belong. Had the proletariat succeeded in destroying capitalism for good, pollution would have been even greater than today, thanks to the fact that vast masses have remained in abject poverty. Contrary to what they often say of themselves, modernists are not forward-looking, but almost exclusively backward-looking creatures. It seems that their vision of the future has blinded them to where they were going, or rather, as if what they meant by the future was entirely made of rejected past, without any realistic content about things to come. They content themselves with utopia, with hype, as if they were preparing themselves to breathe the thin, intoxicating air of globalization. Even the Hegel of phenomenology of spirit could not envision that the advent of the Anthropocene would so radically reverse the direction of his project that human would be dialectically immersed in the geohistorical adventure of carbon, oxygen, and methane. Think of that! The whole breath of a spirit, now sublated, aufheben, overcome, intoxicated by carbon dioxide. If you can still dispute whether we have never been modern or not, who now dispute that we will never be able to modernize the Earth for lack of a 5 planets, this is a calculation in global hectares, that would be needed to push our endless frontier to the same level of development that North America. This is the terrible quandary in which we find ourselves, being either one of those who deny that there is a threat, or one of those who, knowing full well that there is a threat, do nothing to meet it. What is coming at us should appear as a threat, because it's the only way to make you sensitive to the very difficulty of being on this earth. Whatever we do now, the threat will remain with us for centuries, for millennia, because the baton of so many irreversible revolutionary actions by humans has been taken over by the inertial warming of the sea, the changes in the albedo of the poles, by the growing acidity of the ocean, and is visible in the tipping point reached by the slow creep of the Himalaya glaciers. We find ourselves exactly in an age similar to that of Columbus, when his voyage encountered an all-new continent that the circular view of the Mediterranean people could not have anticipated. To absorb a new subversion in the shape of the earth, we are exactly as ill-prepared as medieval Europe was. Except that this time, it's not the extension and expansion of a new piece of land that is revealed by the agency and intensity of the whole earth. It's not a revelation about the spatial, but about the historical extension of the planet. Humans are not stupefied to learn that there is an entire new world at their disposal, but that they have to entirely relearn the way in which they inhabit their same old world. Such is the Möbius strip in which we are now entangled. Such is the experiment in which unwittingly the anthropos of the Anthropocene has been placed. But this time experiments are not safely confined inside the laboratories. The Earth is the laboratory inside which experimenters are imprisoned. The accusation of being irrational cuts no ice anymore, because scientific disciplines have become co-extensive with all the forms of life. People no longer fight for or against science. They decide for themselves where, with whom, and with which agency they wish to live, which oikos they are ready to defend against which other oikos. No matter if the old word for household ends up with nomos, as in economics, or logos, as in ecology, it is no longer able to unify. As long as modernism had elsewhere, humans were happy to live divided, bifurcated into the realm of the necessity on the one hand, that is concatenation of causes and consequences, and on the other, the realm of freedom, that is the creation of law, morality, liberty, and art. That's just the time when, under the name of globalization, the same definition of what it is to be human, equipped with exactly the same set of calculative skill, the same standardized ways of life, the same appetite for consumption, the same limited range of communication and information, the same format for feeling responsible, the same laws of ownership, the same version of the economy are supposed to reign everywhere on Earth. To explore the nomos of the Earth, there is no instrument other than the tiny range of patterns provided by management and governance. We have to turn to the scientists for revelation and for decision just at the time when those same scientists are most unable to play the role of kings. On the throne is a tragic figure, more frightened and more divided than those they have to guide. What good would it be to possess the world if you forfeit your soul? What use it is to save your soul if you forfeit the earth?